Hello, back on track with Hummingbird today. Not said that for over 15 months. This was the first song that I released on One Man and His Songs, and I wanted to go back and find out what I've learned in the intervening 15 months, so I've remixed the song from scratch. This is basically, I've called it Hummingbird 2, but it's basically just a complete remix with actually a totally new rhythm section as well. So I'm going to play it to you, the entire song, and then we'll have a talk about the differences between the two versions and what I've done. I think the difference between the two sounds is startling. Let's hear it. Now, obviously, this song's part of the Back on Track playlist, so you can go back and hear any of the previous versions of this song. Chalk and cheese, just a spectacular. I always knew about 2 days after I released it, being completely happy on the day. When I finally finished it and released my first song, I was so happy. And I came back a couple of days later and listened to it, and it was just shit. I couldn't believe how bad it sounded. And a lot of those things were just progressive deterioration of one's ability to identify when things are going wrong, because you're just lost in the moment and you hear finer and finer detail and lose the wood for the trees. It was muddy as hell. I dramatically pulled out whole swathes of frequencies, thinking only one instrument was allowed to exist. Not dominate, not subtle levels of mixing, exist. So whole sections of the female harmonies, for instance, were just chopped away so that they didn't get in the way of Pauline's lead vocal sound, and they just ended up sounding awful. Same with, well, just pretty much across the board, actually. The whole thing was a bit of a catastrophe. And so rather than try to fix this kind of broken thing, I took the original instruments, burned them to WAV files. You can see that the entire mix is just WAV files. I got rid of all the VST stuff, and then just mixed it completely from scratch. And pretty early on during that process, I discovered that the drums were so bad. They were kind of largely manually programmed and just really egregiously wrong. I thought, okay, I'm going to have to throw the entire rhythm section away and rebuild it from scratch. And in the end, got a sound that I think it sounds pretty good. I played this to a friend of mine and he said it sounds like Superstition. I thought, well, that's fine by me. You know, obviously I'm no Stevie Wonder, but the sound itself is pretty good. And I think that's just nicely mixed. I've been watching a lot of Warren Hewitt's Produce Like a Pro. I'll put a link to his channel down below because I think it is absolutely superb. And he's all about doing the fundamentals well, pressing solo occasionally, listening to stuff and not fearing for your eternal soul, but then always mixing in context, starting with the drums. He almost always starts with the drums. And I get it. They are the foundation and the basis of most songs. Stick your bass and vocals on next and get that core of the song built, and each time laser focus in, have a listen to what's going on, then come out and get it sat in the mix and just mix as you go along and get to what Warren calls a static mix. And I've really been kind of paying really, really close attention to his modus operandi and trying to follow that as a template to say, right, well, I know that not every mix can be identical and you can't always follow the same patterns and apply the same rules, but how about developing some sort of heuristic that allows me to say, okay, in the absence of any reason to not do these common sense, sensible things, I'm going to do these common sense, sensible things. It also gave me an opportunity. I've just recently bought, Waves have got their usual outrageous 94% off sale. It's like, well, guys, why don't you just drop the fundamental price a little bit than having a 94% sale every year? So I've just bought, I think it's the Horizon bundle, I can't remember exactly, but you get a load of the most common stuff. And you saw on the vocals then, I've automatically immediately fallen in love with the de-esser. It's so easy to use and just instantly does exactly what you want it to do. No messing. I think the FabFilter de-esser is just a little bit too complicated for me. I just don't understand what all the controls do and I end up lost. Whereas this thing does exactly what I want it to do. So I'm really happy with that. This is an experiment. Did a bit of reading on the API and tried to figure out whether or not it was a reasonable fit for what I was going for, and at the end of the day just put it on almost randomly, but then tried to find the nicest sound that I could. And then another very highly regarded plugin, Vocal Rider, just levels out all of your volumes without having a dramatic or violent compression. And between all of that stuff, we end up
silent I hide,
with just a really, really
in the shadows I linger,
nice vocal.
so still, so quiet.
I do like that little vocal reverb as well. Let's have a look at that. So Timeless is a dangerous beast because it can very, very quickly get out of hand. It's got some crazy effects in it. But I do very much like this little bit of...
And as the storm clouds pass, the hummingbird flies.
it's almost like a phaser on the reverb as it's tailing away. You just get this coloration of the sound that's absolutely lovely. The guitar sound had a complete overhaul. I mean, I'm going to stop saying that because everything did, but it was way too loud, and again I'd cut masses of frequencies out of all sorts of stuff and it just sounded pretty horrible. I also discovered that there were spikes, moments in the EQ curve when it was doing really pretty unpleasant things, buzzes and nastiness. So I went through each of the sounds trying to identify these things. Oh, that's just absolute mush. All of that horrible mush gone. This is the solo. So the only thing seriously wrong with the solo was all of this high-end stuff. It's just way too brash. Takes it away. The bass sound is now meaty without being dull, and again we've got a few new things here. Got a decapitator on it just to add some extra harmonics up at the top, so it just gives all of the other stuff, all of the other processing that then goes on to look at the bass guitar more to play with. It's got some extra harmonics to hear. So let's see what that's doing. Really not much. I've been very subtle with that because I was scared of going over the top. This just added an extra little bit of colour, tiny bit of drive. Taking away some of the mud, 350, another top tip. Our bass, yeah, I've heard great things about it and it seems to do exactly what it says. Couple of controls, very difficult to get wrong. Woomphy without being muddy. And then a tiny little bit of ducking, and it is subtle off the kick drum. Again, I was just concerned not to overdo anything, so I've done lots and lots of little subtle things that I can either just about hear, or I can't hear on their own, but I can hear in combination. So maybe 2 or 3 effects together, but the end of my little composite chain has to get to a stage where I can hear a definable benefit. I've abandoned the idea of being able to hear every single change that I make. If I make a half dB change to an EQ, I can't hear it. My ears aren't that good. But if I make 3 half dB changes to various components as a part of a sound, then I stand a good chance. So I'm prepared to kind of suspend judgment. I'm calling it transactional working, because if you like perform lots of operations on a database and then rewind them all, it's as if it never happened. And so I'm prepared to take this leap of faith and say these tiny changes that I'm making are going to be in the right direction. But when I get there, when I get to the end of the journey, I need to be able to hear an improvement, or I'm going to take them all back away again. And finally, a fair bit of work on automation, just fixing volumes as the song goes. What do I want to stand at the front of the stage? What's the instrument that I'm most interested in hearing now? Pull all the other stuff back 1, 2, 3 dB. Again, really difficult to hear that at the time. They're too subtle. Those volume changes are too subtle for me to hear. But if I take every instrument except the front and center instruments, if I just pull them all down by a little bit, then it stands to reason that that thing is emphasized, everything else is de-emphasized, and then when a new thing steps forward and everything else comes down by 1, it's going to get a little bit more attention, a little bit more focus. And so It's all been about subtle changes that accumulate together to make what I think is probably the best mix I've done so far. And I think this has gone from being hands down the worst sounding song that I've mixed to probably the best. So that's this 15 months worth of study and learning, and this is where I am now. And now that's Hummingbird 2021 done, and maybe in 1 or 2 years time I'll want to come back to it again, and I want to use these as milestones to find out what my new tool set looks like. Can I bring some of my new shiny tools out of the box and make this song sound better than the last time I tried? And hopefully this will be an evolving process. So, Hummingbird 2026 might actually sound, professional, who knows? So I always said I'd go back and do this. The retrospective mixing was always a fundamental baked in part of the plan. I didn't know if I'd ever actually get around to doing it, and I'm pleased I did, and I think I've learned a lot. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please do hit the like button, helps me out with the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you for the next time. Thanks very much for watching.